So, I finally watched Beetlejuice, or for the sake of both the character count as well as the persistence of the algorithm, Beetlejuice 2, and once again, it's another movie that it's not the complete disaster that I envisioned, and but it's also not really this quote unquote return to form that other people have tried to claim it as main. They're saying that it's George's comeback, but like a great many people all in this world, I'll simply respond with that classic lyric, "Don't call it a comeback." Like, for a film which is among the most successful of the year so far, the post-release his discussion or even mention have been surprisingly muted. And watching this, that's now that's on Max finally. Since I stuck to my beliefs of not wanting to go theatrically, I can see why. Even as someone who has an affinity for the previous film as well as other incarnations, and I just was not vibing with this a sequel the way other people were. And as you can already imagine, there's no real way for me to explain how I feel about it without just us going over the whole thing in detail. So let's begin. So, oh, in our universe, decades have passed since the events of the first film, where Lydia, played by Winona Ryder, now has a child of her own. Astrid, played by Jenna Ortega of Wednesday fame, and let me tell you, she is definitely one of the best new additions in the cast that really works this film, really capturing the particular feelings, especially the more pessimistic ones of younger generations that have now, where when and some of her classmates attempt to prank her in a dorm room at boarding school, well, she responds like, "We'll see who's laughing." And when you're all divorced, or still your second child, ouch. And that also applies to some of the new, but not all the new, who paranormal characters we've got here. With my personal favorite, of course, being Willem Dafoe as Frank Harbowler, a detective movie star turned actor detective who was killed during a live grenade accident on set of one of those movies, was left him without part of his skull, and could definitely tell that both Ortega and Dafoe seem to be some of the few people in this movie that actually seem to be really enjoying themselves. Everyone else just seems like they're under contract to be there, and that includes everyone from Catherine O'Hara to Justin Theroux, to even bit parts from both Baron Gorman and Danny DeVito. And that's one of the things that surprised me the most about this film, was just how mundane it makes the whole concept feel, which to me is not something I should be saying about any of Burton's work, especially a follow up to one of his most bonkers films. It's like even his less well received or less successful movies, he's at least had some of his particular quirkiness that's going on there. Also not saying, hey, that it's impossible to remix the first movie without, while also still capturing what made it so memorable to begin with. But using two major examples, there was actually a cartoon not long after the movie came out, that ran for 165 episodes, which is not currently available for streaming anywhere, but did get at least a complete series DVD release fairly recently, and I also, it's another instance I get to say, I know a guy. I, I actually did watch that one when it was on syndication on Nick back in the day, and I rather liked it for how it managed to tell distinct scenarios from the movie. And also, in a more recent time frame, there is the musical adaptation, which goes all out. I mean, I was actually listening into the soundtracks when I was taking notes on this, and if this movie had been more like that, or if they actually had adapted the musical into a movie like they did with Mean Girls in the here, that's actually would have been something I'd be more on board for. I mean, because maybe it's because of how my current pop culture through lines progressed, but somehow, how having scenes of Monica Bellucci stapling herself together, and having MacArthur Park as your wedding bell doesn't really do it for me. I mean, but when I got to that part, I actually started singing any Weird Al Jurassic Park instead because of how much I know. I know that song way more than the original one. That's basically what kind of. It's not really an age situation either. It's more of a demographic one, I would say. Aside from that, if I'm being particularly blunt as known to be, a lot of the ways they tend to justify this sequel honestly don't make a whole lot of sense to me. I mean, since they cast Bellucci as Betelgeuse' ex, who he boxing Helena after he didn't want to go along with being part of her soul devouring cult, even though the first movie's whole climax hinged on the fact that he wasn't married before, or maybe just being an unreliable narrator. And also there was the. I will admit that the whole bit about like the age gap of centuries and the fact that he is dead was actually one of the funnier gags in this movie. I also will give them credit for, of all the characters that have not come back from the first movie, there are two actors that made the most logical sense to write out their character as dead. I mean, like with Otho, going to have Glenn Shaddix, who was a freaking collaborator with Tim and a friend of his even. He died in 2010. And they don't, I would say, how it happened in the movie, because in real life, it was actually, it was a fall he had in his home. But it is explicitly confirmed that he's not alive anymore. And as for Jeffrey Jones, who played Charles before, or doing things that made sure he would not be in this movie or in a movie of any kind ever again, and they really went over the top in killing him off. I mean, he was going soul searching / bird watching overseas. His plane crashed in the ocean, and when he grabbed onto the destroyed wing to keep from drowning, he got eaten by a shark. I mean, I wouldn't say it's as over the top as the way they dealt with Chef after Isaac Hayes left the show on South Park, but it is a very close second. And the whole sequence being done in stop motion is one of the few things I did find actually visually creative, which would make a nice little segue into some of my other disappointments with this film. And despite the fact that this film came out over more than 30 years and it was after the first one and cost 10 times more to make, before inflation. I don't know. It always looked artistically worse to me, and and that's real. I mean, part of this is due to the fact that they've got different editors, cinematographers, and production designers than they had in the first movie. But also a lot of it is trying to recreate a lot of these ideas with admittedly mixed results. I mean, there are some occasional ones that have that spark. Or I do admittedly like the main shrunken headsman, Bob, who apparently is a pretty popular cosplay, of my understanding, and even serving as a decoy for Beetlejuice so he can get away and hatch a plan to get back at Dolores. But beyond that, it doesn't actually. Well, many of the scenes don't look entirely like a movie. It looks like an overlong SNL skit that's from an episode that's hosted by both Keaton and Ortega. Presumably, he also having a musical guest performance runs from Beyonce, a duetting with Miley Cyrus. But still, and even the whole attempt to modernize some aspects like the new age psychobabble and the conceptual artist stuff as well. They they don't really feel like they're going all the way with that. And also after seeing more book accurate sandworms in Doom Part 2 earlier in the year, seeing them try to be played for comedy, they kind of leaves a cold. I'm also not the only one with this observation. Someone I was staying with did that. That's, but people point out that the human characters and their makeup, they look more dead than a lot of the actual dead characters in the movie, which is a severe miscalculation. I know Rick Baker is more or less retired now, but surely they could have at least gotten him for the right price. I guess Michael looks fine enough. Even if the Kubrick stare from his character is a bit overused, such as like the thumbnail I've got but it just always feels so off, which is in contrast to how, especially is apparent like in Celestial Offices scenes where even though they had the same person from the original one that ended up cutting her wrists, only now she's wearing the same outfit they wear at the hot dog on a stick place, complete with a funny hat. But it just seems like they're only doing this because banking on the people that have seen the original movie, which while also simultaneously trying to introduce it to those who haven't. I know that's the basic purpose of Legacy sequel, but even before the people gave the sequel trilogy, at least is that had some reason to parallel the original trilogy, much like how the original trilogy paralleled Flash Gordon serials and Kurosawa films, and Hidden Fortune in particular. And I still boggle at who the target audience even is for this movie. Since someone who perhaps watched the original a long time ago has only a vague recollection of it, and would want to see it again, only with slightly more contemporary actors and somewhat more convoluted story. The first one, it was more or less pretty simple. Like, you had like a couple that died in an accident, and they had to spook the yuppies buying their house out, out, and that's what prompts them to try to hire Beetlejuice. I mean, but here, here, it's like they got ideas for a whole bunch of different storytelling, and they try to mash them all together. I mean, part of me also wonders would have just do this like as like an event mini series, where he's like with a Peacemaker or Wednesday, which also has Ortega in it. I mean, that sense, I don't know. It just feels like there's a bit too much going on here as well, and the moment that things start to get a bit too much to handle, that's when you end up losing your audience to other pieces of tech instead. I mean, yeah. Not even the only time in the last year or two this has happened, but for a movie that's grossed over $150 million worldwide, the a post-release discussion has been almost virtually non-existent, and while watching this movie, I can actually see why it's happened. I know part of this is because of the whole churn and burn business model a lot of companies have right now. But that also means that they have a lot less time to make their mark. And but with that in mind, I have also seen at least heard of movies that made a lot less, but also end up being talked about a lot more. I mean, which for people who thought that the sequels to Moana or Inside Out were less memorable than the first installments, I would say that this one is like a candidate that would say hold my a crystal ball then and keeps digging further. I mean, I still would actually. I mean, it took me even till fairly recently just to get through all the way through the trailer, let alone the entire movie. I mean, and if it wasn't for these wikis or the notes I took in front of me, I'd barely remember anything at all. I mean, well, since I still maintain that I don't hate it, but I am not going to be one of those people that's going to be saying some of my favorite films this year at all. I mean, I could see myself being proven wrong by the Wild Robot, but looks like my decision to stay home from this one was, at least on a personal level, the right one. And I mean, I still include the original movie in my rotation on spooky season, but I don't see myself extending that same invitation to the sequel at all. I mean, I would argue that a lazy sequel need not do every single thing the original movie did to stand out. All it needs to do is personally understand what made its scene so impactful, and also to understand what made audiences love it to begin with. And if this is the case, I don't entirely think that this movie does that. I mean, even the whole selling point of trying to make it so that the title character was the same quasi Ezra goofball he was in the past doesn't make a whole sense to me, because if you're not going to do anything different with the character, why even make it the movie? I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. And that doesn't, and it also ends up not being entirely accurate, because like the whole literally spilling his guts during like a group therapy session, and the whole potential whole looming threat of a third one with Beetle Baby and going to Vegas. I will say, unless you're actually going to adapt the musical and film, count me out. I mean, since I know that my relationship with the studios got much more complicated, but I still stand by I the what I said when I first saw the film's opening weekend numbers. Congratulations. Just how stave off another quarter of tax write-offs for them. So, while Beetlejuice, aka Beetlejuice 2, might not be as disappointing as I was concerned about it being, I still don't share others' enthusiasm of seeing this as their just comeback. Like, I mean, given how long this film was in development hell, in the great beyond, maybe it should have stayed there. I mean, personally, I would have actually been more on board with the third Gremlins I would have with this. Maybe I'll check out that cartoon. I've heard good things about it. Anyway, I know I'm still working on the last part of the second volume of Master Journeys vlogs, and I want to at least get the third one started before the year is out, strike or not. And I also am working on getting tickets to other flicks such as Moana and Sonic and a few others I got in the pipeline, so that'll be all for now. And I can definitely say that this film was, at least to me, a bit more meh than at Showtime. It did not make my millennium.